"You're drunk, let me take you home," the carpenter said. The Apache girl smiled. "Yours or mine?" The festival had started early in the afternoon and slowly stretched into the night. By the time the last song faded and the lights were switched off one by one, most people had already gone home. Paper cups lay scattered on the ground, and the smell of food and dust still hung in the air. A few volunteers remained, tired but laughing, folding chairs and loading tables into trucks. Among them was the carpenter. He was used to working late, so the long day did not bother him much. His hands were rough from years of building and repairing things, and he preferred simple work that showed clear results. Fixing a broken door or building a table made sense to him. People, on the other hand, were complicated. He did not always know what to say, so he usually kept quiet. As he carried a stack of wooden boards toward the storage shed, he noticed someone sitting alone near the edge of the parking lot. A young woman sat on the curb, her shoes placed neatly beside her. Her head was tilted slightly back as she looked up at the sky, smiling softly as if the stars were telling her a private joke. She held her phone loosely in her hand, not really using it. He recognized her. She was the Apache girl who lived on the other side of town. Everyone knew her by sight, even if they did not know her well. She had grown up around here but never quite blended in. Some people admired her confidence, others misunderstood it. The carpenter had spoken to her only once or twice before, small polite exchanges, nothing more. He walked a little closer and noticed her movements were slow, careful, like she was trying not to draw attention to herself. It was clear she had been drinking, not out of control, but enough to make the night feel softer and lighter around her. The parking lot was almost empty now, and the quiet felt different after all the noise. He hesitated. It was none of his business, but something about the way she sat there, alone in the dark, made him uneasy. He put the boards down, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked over. "Hey," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. She turned her head and looked up at him. Her eyes focused slowly, then brightened when she recognized him. Her smile grew wider, playful and warm. "Oh," she said, drawing the word out. "You're the carpenter." "That's me," he replied. "Everyone's heading out. Are you okay?" She laughed softly, a sound that floated easily in the night air. "I'm great," she said, "just enjoying the quiet." He glanced around again. "Have you got a ride home?" She shrugged, still smiling. "Not yet." He shifted his weight, feeling awkward. "You've had a bit to drink," he said carefully. "Let me take you home." For a moment she just looked at him. Then she smiled in a different way, sharper but not unkind. "Yours or mine?" she asked lightly. The question caught him off guard. He blinked, unsure how to respond. He had meant it in the most simple, responsible way possible, and now the meaning had twisted into something else entirely. He cleared his throat. "I meant your place," he said honestly. "Just to make sure you get there safe." She studied his face as if checking for something. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her. She laughed again, shaking her head. "Relax," she said. "I'm just joking." "Okay," he replied, relieved. "Then come on, my truck's over there." She stood up slowly, picking up her shoes and slipping them back on. When she stood, she swayed just a little. Instinctively, he reached out his hand, not touching her, just close enough in case she needed balance. She noticed and smiled at the small gesture. "You're kind," she said. He shrugged. "Just practical." They walked to his truck, the gravel crunching under their feet. As they drove out of the parking lot, the silence returned, broken only by the sound of the engine and the hum of tires on the road. The town looked different at night, calmer, almost honest. She leaned back in the seat and stared out the window. "You know," she said after a while, "people always think they know me." He glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "That happens to a lot of people. They think I'm trouble," she continued, "or that I don't care, or that I'm just having fun all the time." She smiled, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "It gets tiring." He nodded slowly. "People see what they want to see." She looked at him now. "What do you see?" The question felt heavier than the first one. He thought for a moment. Someone who stayed till the end of a long day, he said. Someone who didn't want to go home yet. She laughed quietly. That's a fair answer. They drove on, the road stretching ahead of them. She started talking about the festival, about how she loved the music because it reminded her of home and family gatherings when she was younger. Her words came easily, sometimes jumping from one thought to another, but there was a calm rhythm to her voice. He listened more than he spoke. When she asked him questions, he answered simply. He told her about his work, how he learned the trade from his uncle, how he liked creating things that lasted. He admitted that he wasn't great with words, that he preferred actions. That makes sense, she said. Actions tell the truth faster. They reached a quiet neighborhood and she pointed out which street to turn down. As they slowed near her house, she sighed softly like someone waking from a pleasant dream. Well, she said, this is me. He parked the truck and turned to face her. You good to get inside? She nodded. Yeah, I am. She opened the door, then paused. Thanks for not making it weird, she said. He smiled slightly. Thanks for trusting me. She closed the door and walked toward her house, steady now. He waited until she reached the porch and unlocked the door. Only then did he start the engine again. As he drove away, he felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't excitement or regret. It was more like awareness. A simple moment, handled carefully, had left a mark. And he knew that night would stay with him longer than he expected. The next few days passed quietly, but the night did not leave either of them. For the carpenter, work continued as usual. He woke early, packed his tools, and spent long hours measuring wood, cutting boards, and fixing old things for people who rarely noticed the effort behind the work. Yet, while his hands stayed busy, his mind often wandered back to that calm drive, the soft laugh, and the way she had looked at the stars as if the world had not hardened her yet. He did not expect to see her again so soon. Small towns, however, have a way of crossing paths when people least plan it. 3 days later, he stopped by the local hardware store to pick up nails and paint. The bell above the door rang as he stepped inside. The smell of metal, wood, and oil filled the space. He nodded to the man behind the counter and walked toward the shelves. That was when he heard her voice. Do you always stare at screws like they're about to confess something? He turned around, surprised. She stood a few steps away, holding a small basket with light bulbs and a roll of tape. She looked different in the daylight, more grounded, more awake. Her hair was tied back loosely and her eyes were clear. I was thinking, he said honestly, about whether I picked the right size. She smiled. You did, you always do. That caught him off guard. You don't know that. I have a feeling, she replied. They stood there for a moment, both unsure how to continue. The easy humor from the night before was still there, but now it shared space with awareness, sober awareness, the kind that made moments feel more real. How are you? He asked. Better, she said. I didn't embarrass myself, did I? He shook his head. Not at all. She exhaled, relieved. Good. I've been thinking about that night too. He nodded slowly. Me too. They walked toward the counter together. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the street and people passed by without noticing the quiet tension between them. She paid for her things and turned to him. I was heading for coffee, she said, hesitating slightly. You don't have to, but would you like to join me? He had work waiting, a list of tasks and responsibilities, but he surprised himself by saying yes. The cafe was small and familiar, the kind of place where everyone knew the owner and the chairs had been there for years. They sat by the window, cups between them, steam rising gently. For a while they talked about simple things: work, weather, town events. Then slowly the conversation shifted. You know, she said, stirring her coffee, people assume confidence means nothing can hurt you. He nodded. They assume silence means nothing is felt. She looked at him. That's true. She told him about growing up between two worlds. About traditions that shaped her and expectations that followed her everywhere. About being proud of who she was but tired of having to explain it. "Sometimes," she said softly, "I just want to exist without being watched." He listened carefully. "I get that," he said. "I build things because they don't ask questions," she smiled. "But people do." "Yes," he agreed, "and sometimes they don't like the answers." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, a car passed, music playing faintly. "You didn't cross any line that night," he said finally. "If that's what you're worried about." She looked relieved. "I was afraid you might think I was careless." "I thought you were honest," he replied. "There's a difference." She met his eyes, surprised. "Not many people see that," he shrugged. "I'm not many people." As they finished their drinks, something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, something steadier, respect. They stood to leave and she paused near the door. "Would you like to walk?" she asked. "Just a little," he agreed. They walked through the town slowly, the afternoon stretching ahead of them. She pointed out places from her childhood, a park bench where she used to sit with her grandmother, a closed shop that once sold handmade jewelry. "You notice things," he said. "I remember feelings," she replied. They stopped near a small bridge. Water moved quietly beneath it. "I don't usually let people in," she admitted. "But that night you didn't expect anything from me." "I didn't," he said. "I just wanted you safe." She smiled softly. "That's why I trusted you." The words stayed with him. When they finally parted, there was no rush, no promise. Just an understanding that something meaningful had begun, even if neither of them knew where it would lead. That evening, as he locked his workshop, he realized something simple yet important. Some connections are not loud. They don't demand attention. They grow quietly, built on moments where someone chooses care over assumption. And somewhere across town, she sat by her window, watching the sky darken, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. Not because someone had saved her, but because someone had truly seen her. Both of them went asleep that night knowing one thing for sure. Whatever came next, it would not be careless. No sudden promises or big words. It happened quietly, the way real connections often do. Sometimes they met by chance at the market, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes just passing each other on the street. Each meeting felt natural, as if the town itself was guiding them into the same spaces. The carpenter noticed changes in himself. He started looking forward to the end of the day in a way he hadn't before. Not because he expected anything to happen, but because he enjoyed the simple comfort of her presence. When he worked, he found himself thinking about conversations instead of measurements, about words instead of wood. She noticed changes too. She felt less guarded, less tired of explaining herself. With him, she didn't feel the need to perform or impress. She could speak honestly or sit quietly, and both felt equally safe. One afternoon, she stopped by his workshop. The door was open, sunlight pouring in. The smell of fresh wood filled the air. He looked up from his work, surprised to see her standing there, hands in her pockets, smiling uncertainly. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "Not at all," he replied, setting his tools aside. "What brings you here?" She glanced around, clearly curious. "I wanted to see where you spend your time." He wiped his hands and gave her a small tour. He explained how each tool worked, how patience mattered more than strength. She listened carefully, touching the smooth surface of a finished table. "You make things that last," she said. He nodded. "I try." She hesitated, then spoke softly. "I've never really felt like I belonged anywhere." He paused. "You belong where you are treated with care." She looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "I'm still learning to believe that." They sat outside the workshop, sharing water from a bottle, talking about small memories. She spoke about her childhood, about learning songs from elders, about moving between places and never fully settling. He spoke about growing up quiet, about learning to fix things because it was easier than talking about feelings. At one point, she laughed. "We're both good at avoiding attention," he smiled. "In different ways." As weeks passed, their bond deepened. They shared meals, long walks, and quiet evenings. There was no rush. Each moment felt chosen, not forced. One evening they attended another community gathering together. This time, the lights felt brighter, the music louder. People noticed them side by side. Some looked curious, some looked surprised. She felt the familiar weight of being watched. He noticed the way her shoulders stiffened. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, but he could tell she was uneasy. They stepped outside for air. The night wrapped around them gently. "Sometimes," she said, "I feel like I'm always being judged." He stood beside her, steady. "You don't have to prove anything," she sighed. "I know, but knowing and feeling are different." He nodded. "If you ever want to leave, we can." She looked at him, grateful. "Let's stay a little longer." They returned inside, and this time she felt less alone. Not because people had changed, but because she wasn't facing them by herself. Later that night, they sat on a bench near the edge of town. The sky was clear, stars bright. "I've made mistakes," she said suddenly. "I trusted people who didn't deserve it." He listened without judgment. "I don't want to repeat them," she continued. "That's why I move slowly now." He met her gaze. "So do I," she smiled softly. "Maybe that's why this feels safe." Silence settled between them, comfortable and warm. As they parted that night, there was no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet understanding that they were building something real, step by step. He returned home feeling calm. She returned home feeling hopeful. Neither of them knew exactly where the path would lead, but both knew they were walking it with care, honesty, and patience. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. Time moved forward, steady and quiet, like a river that did not rush but never stopped. Their connection continued to grow, not through big events but through ordinary days. Morning messages that wished each other well. Short meetings that turned into long walks. Shared silence that felt as meaningful as conversation. But with closeness came questions. Real ones. The kind that could not be ignored forever. One afternoon, the carpenter received a call from a contractor in a nearby town. It was a good opportunity, better pay, more stable work, the kind of chance people waited years for. He listened carefully, thanked the man, and said he would think about it. That evening, he met her near the river path where they often walked. The sky was turning orange, the air cool and calm. She noticed something was different the moment she saw him. "You're quiet," she said gently. "I got an offer," he replied. "Work in another town." She stopped walking. "That sounds important." "It is," he said honestly, "but it would mean leaving." She looked at the water, then back at him. "For how long? Maybe a year, maybe more." The words settled between them, heavy but calm. She did not react the way he feared. She did not accuse him. She did not ask him to stay. Instead, she nodded slowly. "I'm glad you told me," she said. "I didn't want to hide it," he replied. "Whatever this is between us, it deserves honesty," she smiled faintly. "It does." They sat on a rock near the water. The sound of the river filled the silence. "I've had people leave before," she said quietly. "Some without saying goodbye, some without explanation." He looked at her concerned. "I'm not running away." "I know," she said quickly. "This feels different." She took a breath. "I just need time to understand what this means for me." He nodded. "Take all the time you need." That night she went home feeling unsettled. Not because he might leave, but because she cared enough to feel the weight of it. She sat by her window, watching the moon rise, thinking about how far she had come, about how safe she felt now, about how fear always showed up when something mattered. The next few days were quieter, not distant but thoughtful. They still spoke, still met, but both were aware of the change, a turning point they could not ignore. One morning she visited her aunt, a woman who had always been honest with her. They sat together drinking tea. "You seem torn," her aunt said. "I am," she admitted. "I don't want to hold someone back, but I also don't want to lose myself." Her aunt nodded. Loving someone does not mean disappearing, and letting someone go does not mean losing them. Those words stayed with her. Later that week, she asked the carpenter to meet her at the park. Children played nearby, laughter filling the air. "I've been thinking," she said. "So have I," he replied. She looked at him directly. If you go, I won't ask you to stay. But I need to know that what we've built is real, not something that fades with distance. He answered without hesitation. It's real to me, and I'm willing to do the work to keep it that way. She smiled, relieved. That's all I needed to hear. At the same time, he faced his own doubts. He worried about starting over, about whether distance would change things, about whether he was strong enough to hold onto something meaningful while chasing a future. One evening, he sat alone in his workshop, running his hand over a table he had just finished. He realized something simple. He had always built things carefully, knowing they would face wear and weather. He didn't stop building just because something might break someday. That thought gave him peace. As the days passed, they found a new balance. They talked openly about fears, hopes, and boundaries. There were no dramatic promises, just clear words and honest intentions. One night they attended a small gathering together. This time she felt steadier. When people looked, she did not shrink. When whispers floated, she ignored them. He stood beside her, not possessive, just present. Afterward, as they walked home, she laughed softly. I used to think strength meant standing alone. And now, he asked. Now I think it means choosing who stands with you. He smiled. As the decision day approached, they both felt nervous but also calm. Whatever happened, they knew they had faced it with honesty and respect. On the evening before he was meant to give his answer, they sat together under the stars, just like that first night in the parking lot. Do you remember what you said to me? She asked. When? He replied. That night, she said. You said you just wanted me safe. He nodded. I meant it. She took his hand gently. I still feel that. He squeezed her hand lightly. So do I. In that moment, neither of them knew exactly what the future held, but they knew one thing clearly. They were no longer afraid to speak, to feel, or to choose with intention. And that made all the difference. The morning he was supposed to give his answer arrived quietly. No loud signs, no pressure from the sky, just another normal day that felt heavier than the rest. The carpenter woke early and sat on the edge of his bed for a long time thinking. He had always believed that big choices should feel dramatic, like a clear door opening or closing. But this one felt different. It felt calm, thoughtful, and serious. He went to his workshop and finished a small project he had been working on for weeks. As he sanded the wood, he realized something important. No matter where he went, this part of him would remain the same. The way he built, the way he cared, the way he chose to act with respect. Later that day, he called the contractor and accepted the job. His voice was steady. When he hung up, he did not feel fear. He felt responsibility. He knew the choice would change things, but it did not mean losing what mattered. That evening, he met her by the river. The sun was low, painting the water gold. She could tell right away that he had made a decision. You decided, she said softly. Yes, he replied. I'm going, she nodded. There was a moment of silence, but it was not painful, it was full. I'm proud of you, she said. He looked surprised. You are? Yes, she said. Because you chose growth without pretending it wouldn't affect anyone else. He smiled. I didn't want to leave without facing it honestly. They sat together, feet near the water. She told him she had also made a decision. She would stay. She had things to do here. Family to support. A sense of place she had worked hard to build. I don't want to follow someone just to avoid being alone, she said. I want to stand on my own and choose connection, not depend on it. He respected that deeply. That's who you are, he said. Strong in your own way. They agreed on something simple. They would not make promises they could not keep. They would stay in touch. They would speak honestly, and they would let time show them what was possible. The days before his departure passed quickly. They spent time together, not trying to hold on to every moment but appreciating them as they came. Walks, meals, quiet talks, laughter that felt earned. On his last night in town, they returned to the same place where everything had begun. The parking lot was empty again, quiet under the stars. It's strange, she said. That one small moment can change so much. He nodded. Only if you handle it with care, she smiled. You did. They stood there for a while, neither rushing the goodbye. When the time came, it was gentle, no dramatic words, just gratitude. Be safe, she said. I will, he replied. You too. When he drove away the next morning, he did not feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was carrying it with him. Life in the new town was busy. The work was demanding but meaningful. He learned new methods, met new people, and grew in confidence. At night, he often thought of her. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just shared small updates. There were days when distance felt long, and days when it felt manageable. Back home, she continued building her life. She helped her family. She joined community projects. She spoke more openly, with less fear of being misunderstood. The connection they shared had changed her. Not because it had saved her, but because it had shown her what respect felt like. Months passed. Seasons changed. One afternoon, nearly a year later, the carpenter returned to town for a short visit. He did not tell many people, but he told her. They met at the cafe where they had first talked properly. When she walked in and saw him, her smile was immediate and real. You're back, she said. For a little while, he replied. They sat and talked, catching up easily. There was no awkwardness. No pressure to pretend nothing had changed, because things had changed. They were both stronger now, more grounded. As they walked through town later, side by side, people noticed them again. But this time, neither cared. You seem lighter, he said. So do you, she replied. They stopped near the bridge and looked at the water moving below. I don't know what the future looks like, she said honestly. Neither do I, he said. But I know I want to face it with the same care we've shown so far. She nodded. That matters more than certainty. That evening, as the sun set, they sat quietly, comfortable in the unknown. Their story was not about perfect timing or dramatic endings. It was about two people choosing respect, honesty, and patience. And that choice, more than anything else, was what made it real.